welcome to this brand new episode of Newsmakers, the show where we bring to you spectacular stories of inspirational people from different walks of life. Because at Newsmakers, we aspire to inspire you. My dear lovely audience, I'm your host Simran, and I'm really delighted because on our sets today, we have the CEO and co-founder of MODIFI. He's a serial entrepreneur and a prominent figure in the fintech industry. Please allow me to welcome Mr. Nelson Holzner on the sets of Newsmakers. A very warm welcome to you, Mr. Nelson. It is so good to have you here with us in the show today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Simran. Great to be on the show.
So I would like to begin with this very important question. Can you please tell us all about MODIFI? When was this conceptualized and how has it grown since inception?
Yeah, I'm happy to introduce MODIFI. So actually, MODIFI stands for Modern Digital Finance, and it is a global platform for cross-border payments and financing solutions targeting at exporters worldwide. And the first country we actually launched this product was India some 4 years ago. So what it does really is to enable exporters, small to mid-sized exporters in India, to tap into the global opportunities and to sell their goods and services to buyers all over the world. And we enable this by providing liquidity into this system, because very often large buyers ask for payment terms. So they basically make the exporter wait for money, 30 to 180 days very often. And this is a real challenge for many businesses. And we are stepping in and provide early cash to the exporter.
It is so good to hear that you're making life easier for all the exporters. But I'm inquisitive to know, how is MODIFI different from other fintech companies?
I think we are actually, I'm a fintech entrepreneur for 20 years almost. So I had another business in Europe, which was also a buy now, pay later solution, a bit like a Zest Money solution, maybe here in India. And when we sold this company, we said, let's kind of take this up now for the B2B commerce. So like really helping importers, exporters globally. And I think that's also the key differentiator. So it's not a local business only. It really is designed to help businesses globally with a very nasty problem I just laid out. And I think very few fintechs really tackle a global marketplace. They typically tend to work on 1 or 2 local markets and then maybe expand. Our business model by definition is global. So we said, let's build a global platform from day one and roll it out also globally in a very fast pace. So we are present in basically Asia Pacific, most important region for us, but also the EMEA, so Europe, Middle East, and North America. That was roughly 80% of global trade. So I think there's very few fintechs who have such a global approach to their business model.
So viewers, please note, MODIFI is one such venture which has a global approach amongst other fintech ventures. Now with that, could you also tell us that how is MODIFI going to benefit India?
I think we actually have already benefited India quite a bit. So we have transacted more than $1.5 billion already worth of goods and services for Indian businesses and entrepreneurs in the first few years. So we really elevate, I think, the game and level the playing field, quite frankly, for these Indian small to mid-sized exporters. And I think this is also, I think, structurally a super interesting market for us, because it's so much driven by the power of local small to mid-sized businesses, right? So 45% of the manufacturing is actually happening in small to mid-sized businesses. And those are very often the companies who also should be able to export their goods, right? And benefit from global trade and earn some extra money. And I think very often we see also when we support these businesses, they also have the chance to grow their own business, so they can create more employment opportunities and create, like all the environment and infrastructure, schools, accommodation very often. So I think it really also benefits local economies, not only the business owners themselves.
Good news, exporter. MODIFI is not only going to benefit entrepreneurs, but is also going to add to the economy of India. What a great news it is. Now, how about your growth in India, Mr. Nelson? How has it been for you?
I think we actually have already benefited India quite a bit. So we have transacted more than $1.5 billion already worth of goods and services for Indian businesses and entrepreneurs in the first few years. So we really elevate, I think, the game and level the playing field, quite frankly, for these Indian small to mid-sized exporters. And I think this is also, I think, structurally a super interesting market for us, because it's so much driven by the power of local small to mid-sized businesses, right? So 45% of the manufacturing is actually happening in small to mid-sized businesses. And those are very often the companies who also should be able to export their goods, right? And benefit from global trade and earn some extra money. And I think very often we see also when we support these businesses, they also have the chance to grow their own business, so they can create more employment opportunities and create, like all the environment and infrastructure, schools, accommodation very often. So I think it really also benefits local economies, not only the business owners themselves.
So you mean to say it's a mutual growth, like if India is growing, so are you. Now we see that Indian startups are working towards solving this cross-border issue. Now could you tell us, what are those gaps and how is MODIFI helping to bridge those gaps?
So it has been a marvelous journey for us, quite frankly. Again, like coming out of Europe, so we are based actually in Europe. I come from Berlin. India was the first non-European market we tackled, and it was actually the market where we started the most successful product very early on. So that was very exciting to build the product really also around the business needs of Indian exporters very early on in our journey. So I think very much a blueprint for the entire company, quite frankly. And I think this is also why we have the largest team actually here in India. And I would say more than half of our staff actually has Indian backgrounds, where they are basically working out of India or whether they're working out of other offices. So I think there has always been a very strong Indian influence, I think, in the company per se. And I think it has also been a journey to understand better the needs of these, local companies, right? I think very often, I think they also still need to be even I would say hinted how much opportunity there is, quite frankly, because they are still very focused on their local economy sometimes. So when we say have you actually thought about, selling your products globally? Very often they say this is too complicated for me and I can't afford to wait for my money. So I think we really also, I think, learned a lot from the Indian community, quite frankly, for the product and for our overall setup. I think, but we also try to give back to basically open the eyes a bit and broaden the view on the opportunity out there. And I think that has been, I think, a fantastic journey. And we are serving hundreds of businesses here in India. Both exporters, but also increasingly more and more buyers who basically then benefit from the payment terms we grant when they buy from elsewhere. So it's really like almost a network and an ecosystem now.
Now, my dear viewers, like Mr. Nelson rightly said, that we do face challenges, but we have to work on the mindset. We have to encourage to work abroad and shoot for the stars. What are your plans for the next 5 years, Mr. Nelson? How do you see India's fitting into them?
Yeah, so I think, and I think I forgot to mention, I think it has actually been a very fantastic journey in the last 4 years, right? So we grew our business here in India about 1,000 times. So it's a very, very strong momentum we are building on. But we still believe it's just the beginning, right? I think both for MODIFI, but also for the Indian economy per se. I mean, India is a global powerhouse. I think everybody understands it now, I think, better. It's the 6th largest economy, even third, I think, if you look put the power of purchasing in the mix. So I think it is a very important part. I think the government does a great job and has started very early to also, with initiative like Make in India, to really boost and move the economy in that direction. So I think the macro trend for India is great. I think the outlook is great. What we also see, because as a global company, we always look at every market, where does, the goods flow and where are the deals happening. I think there's very strong momentum and high hopes also for the Indian economy to really win the race of becoming the leading manufacturing and service hub and export hub, I think, in the region for sure. We see many buyers recalibrating their supply chains also. Where do I get my goods from? I think that people want to have a more diverse supply chain. And obviously, when you see the term friendshoring, right? I think people also want to have less dependency on single supply markets like China, for example. So I think there's a very good macro momentum towards India. And this will only continue to be better. And we will obviously ride this wave because we are here already and we are supporting and growing the business partners we are working with. So, so far we have, again, more than $1.5 billion already deployed here in India. And we definitely want to triple this amount in the next 5 years. So it's one of the core markets for us, and yeah, I think it's really also, I think, a very good reason for the Indian economy to be extremely bullish, right? Even in the macroeconomic environment we are finding ourselves in, I think this country is super well positioned to tackle all the challenges.
I love the enthusiasm you have while working with the Indian market. India's growing economy, and I'm sure it is going to grow many folds with your amalgamation. Are you also going to provide any more services in the near future?
So indeed, I think partially the service is already on the platform and we roll it out more and more aggressively. But I think in addition to the ones I mentioned, I think it's also a platform where people can also benefit from increased visibility, for example, right? So there is a shipment tracking tool available on the platform. When you log in, you can just put in your container number, for example, and see where are my goods ultimately, right? We are sometimes also a bit surprised that many of the exporters don't have that visibility yet. So they basically put the cargo on the lorry or like in the container, and then they hope and pray that it also arrives at the destination port. These tools enable, I think, a lot more visibility and planning. The same is true for tools which also help the financial department of a company, or like the business owner who looks after the finances, to plan liquidity. When can I expect the payments? What kind of limits do I have for which buyers? Where can I expect more orders? So all these tools are available and will be increasingly rolled out on this platform. So that's more than just a payments place. It hopefully is a place where you can manage all your trades from a financing perspective and like cross-border payments perspective, and also for business planning and management, really.
Wonderful. This shipment tracking tool is one of the finest things MODIFI has done, and it has made life easier for all the exporters. Mr. Holzner, now I would like to know, as a third-person perspective, sitting in the international market, how do you see India's growth, Indian export markets growth rather? Do you have something for them to change?
Yeah, I think as I mentioned before, I think overall I'm very bullish on direction of travel. I think that's really good. And I think again, I think it's very often more a mind shift thing than like actual performance. I think there's very good quality in the market. I think there's lots of entrepreneurial drive, I think, in the society. I think that's really super important. What we do see obviously is that in other markets, sometimes marketplaces are a bit more mature because they're a bit better orchestrated. For example, when I look, for example, to China, I think they've done a great job in platform businesses like Alibaba.com, for example, where they really enable also, and obviously it's open to Indian business as well. But I mean, like India is so strong in their own platforms, right? And there's so much innovation coming from India. I also sometimes are a bit surprised that we don't see something like an Alibaba.com actually out of India, quite frankly, right? Because it would be perfectly positioned and aligned with the Make in India initiative, with the governmental support. The ecosystem is there. So I think these tools really also help to digitize the journey and to make things easier for the exporters. But I think ultimately that is driven by yet another entrepreneur, maybe in India, from the digital scene, to say like, why don't I build, an Alibaba.com export marketplace, for example, specifically designed for the Indian exporters, I would say.
I'm sure all the exporters and entrepreneurs who are watching this show right now would agree to that we all need such a platform, one-stop solution which will make life easier for all the exporters. Now here I would like to know those success stories where MODIFI has played a significant role in their success, specifically in Indian market.
Yeah, so I mean, many, I can't give names, unfortunately, because this is kind of like in banking, right? You have to be a bit careful of what names can you actually like share with the public. But I think maybe two things come to mind. I think one company is really, I think, a fantastic company, which it's also something we like to see on the platform. They basically came really through the Indian marketing and sales channel to our platform. It was a purely Indian business in the manufacturing place. And they have grown in the last 5 years from, I only serve the Indian market to I serve, I think now 15, 16 markets. And they were only serving one industry. I think now they serve 16 industries globally. So we came in very early in the journey and, supported them in one line of business only for the Indian exports. And we were able to continue and support them also in their own journey around the globe. So when they started to business, to their own legal entity in the US, for example, to serve the US market a bit better, we were then also able to say, okay, we also help you with the US business, right? And when they went to Singapore, we actually did the same in Singapore. So I think this is also something we see a lot when Indian entrepreneurs structure their business. They start in one market, but then all of a sudden you realize, they are very sophisticated, and they also plan very, very sophisticated, in that they set up shop in Dubai, for example, very often, or in Singapore. And then you basically have to be there also to help them in their new local businesses, right? So we grew that business I just talked about from single-digit millions to, I think, 220 million, I think, in dollars in last year. And I think they are continuing. I think they are expecting to have more like 500-600 million in revenues this year. So we are basically also growing with these businesses and supporting them in different places. Another one would be an apparel, a garment manufacturer in the south, which is also great because they really also were able then to work with much, much larger fashion brands and retailers, because we were able to basically bridge that cash flow problem. And I think we also grew that business, I think, 10x in the last 2 years. So they're typically what we like to see, right? Basically, we try to give, people some gas on the tank, so to say, so that they can grow their business. And when they grow, they also probably need a bit more, from our support and our services. So that's the ideal customer for us, right? If you grow a business, and we can also grow our own business on top of their own growth. So I think that's exactly what we like to see. And we have, many examples, but those 2 examples come to mind.
I am sure there are going to be many more such success stories in the near future. Mr. Nilsson, as we all know, that technology is rapidly evolving. And I would like to know, how does MODIFI stay ahead of the curve in terms of innovation, and they incorporate the latest advancement to offer cutting-edge solution to its clients?
Yeah, I think, for us, I think the precondition for the entire company was that if you deploy technology and data in this fairly old-fashioned business segment, you can really make a difference. And I think this is also what we are seeing, but you're right. I mean, every day basically brings a new innovation, and we have to kind of stay up to date. I think from the very beginning, we very much focused on large amounts of data to understand where our customers are, who they trade with, who could be good, next customers, but also how can we mitigate risks, for example, if something goes wrong, or if you have fraud. Basically, I think that's one of the challenges in international trade, because people simply don't have the personal relationship very often because they don't meet anymore, right? So I think big data and analyzing that data with AI tools, for example, is very much important for us to also filter out potential fraud cases or illegitimate businesses who try to leverage the platform. So I think these are very important parts. We always consider blockchain-based solutions. I mean, at the moment, our platform is agnostic. It can use any rails. It can be using traditional bank rails for the payments, but it could also be using blockchain payments. And I think it's still, I think, not fully there, I would say, at scale, because it is very complicated for customers to onboard themselves and to create these wallets, for example. But for us, I mean, whatever makes transactions faster nationally is good. And if blockchain is a solution in the future, we would be obviously also more than happy to put our own services on a blockchain-powered payment rail. So I think those are the areas we are constantly looking at, and also deploy these tools to make our services better and faster.
You rightly said technology has played boon for all the industries. Now please tell me, that there are cross-border transactions. They often involve complex regulatory frameworks. How does MODIFI navigate regulatory challenges to ensure seamless financial solution for its clients?
Yeah, I think it's a very, very important aspect, right? And I think the Indian regulator is I think at the forefront of many of these challenges in the digital finance space, quite frankly, right? Be it from consumer to also B2B and payments, and as we all know, it's also like a foreign exchange regulated market, which also makes it a bit more tougher, I think, sometimes for Indian exporters to really do business, for example, in US dollars, and lots of the trade is still happening in US dollars these days. At least on our platform, it's more than 90%. So that's also part of the value proposition, is that we look after these ins and outs of how we actually can, move US dollars in the system and also make them available to the entrepreneurs, right? There's not much value if we are pushing the send button, but the Indian exporter doesn't get the money because the local bank is not, allowing this transaction to ultimately be credited. So you really have to know how to navigate also like the requirements and how the banks think about these international transactions to ensure that it is a seamless service. I think that's also a competence which we have built out. And I think not only India has these challenges, right? I think the same applies, quite frankly, to markets like China. So very, very large export markets have these regulations in place. And those who navigate and are aware and can actually like manage these transactions cross-border really, I think, put a lot of benefit in the hands of the exporters who use us. So it's definitely something which is part of the game. If you are in financial services, you have to be fully compliant and you have to be on top of the game, so that you can also deliver that service, in a compliant manner and reliable manner. And so far, it has been, I think, a very good journey. But it is definitely something where you need a lot of expertise to roll it out on a global scale.
Now, there is this very important question coming your way, Mr. Holzner, which is how does MODIFI mitigate risk for Indian businesses engaged in cross-border trades? Now, what is your advice for such uncertainties?
Yeah, I think from a regular point of view, if you have good service providers like us, I think you should basically hopefully have the trust that they can manage these regulatory risks. I think what is also very important for cross-border trade, and I think also one of the key value propositions, just on top of the money we provide and the liquidity, is that our product comes with a risk protection in case the foreign buyer is not paying the bill, right? I think very often, as I mentioned, you don't really have that personal relationship. You don't know, your counterpart very well. Not everybody is an Amazon or a Zara, right? You also have buyers who are, a little less known. And especially in these volatile markets, and the markets have been tough in the last 4 years, right? We had COVID-19, we had the supply chain chaos. Now we have lots of political tensions, like in Europe, but also in other parts of the world. So I think there is a lot of instability at the moment. And so far, I think we have been lucky because the US consumer has been playing along very nicely. But I think that is a key risk, I think, is really also, do I actually get my money at all, right? So I basically put in all my work, I pay all my staff, I, source all the goods, I manufacture the goods, I send them over. And then when, the payment date is arriving, I still don't see money on my account. What can I do, right? And what MODIFI does actually, if you basically use our platform, we also ensure that if a company on the buyer side is no longer able to pay the bill because they went bankrupt or insolvent, we will still make good for that loss. So I think it's very important that you basically have not only a liquidity effect, but you also have a protection against default risk on the buyer side. And I think this is something which I think is especially in these last 4 years, has become more and more valuable because people are a bit more insecure about, your business partner, right? Your customer. And I mean, you can do your own research, but very often our customers are very, very good at manufacturing or producing the goods and services they are selling, but they're not really having a great expertise in understanding credit risk, for example, and liquidity positions and, the understanding of the buyer. So I think company like ours can help that because this is exactly our core job, right? We do this day in, day out as our core business to understand like which buyers are good and legitimate and reliable and which buyers are probably not maybe like a business partner where you want to have a large outstanding exposure and waiting for your money for a long time.
So Mr. Holzner, now this is going to be my last and a little out of the box question. Something very personal. Now you have been in Germany for years. I'm so keen to know your perception about being in India. How do you find India?
I mean, I love India, and I actually get a lot of energy from my trips, to our local teams and to our local partners and customers. So it's, I think, for me, a very important and fun part of my journey, quite frankly. It is a bit of stretch. Basically, we are basically running the business, and I think India is, I think, time zone wise, pretty close to Europe. But we run the business, from Shenzhen in China to Mexico City. So there's hardly any overlap that everybody is awake at the same time at the desk. So it is a bit of a stretch to run a global company. But I think, technology helps a lot, like with video calls. This is all a lot easier than maybe like, 5-10 years ago. But yeah, I think, you have to be open. You have to embrace also, the different cultures. And I love the Indian culture. Like, it's such a diverse country. Every time I come here, I learn something else. I meet, wonderful people, inspiring entrepreneurs. So I take a lot of energy also with me back to Europe when I return, end of next week.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Holzner. It was great interacting with you, and I just love this interview. Thank you, viewers, for always giving us your love and support. And here's Simran signing off with this promise that I will be back soon with another dynamic story. But if you too feel that you have a story to share, please write to us on the email reflecting here. Till then, stay blessed.